distinguished members on the dais, ladies, gentlemen, batch of 2014-16, good morning, welcome. Pardon me, my throat is a little under the weather, but I think I should be able to manage. You know, when Dean Manohar, thank you, when Dean Manohar asked me whether I would come and speak, as somebody said, Dean Manohar is one of the most networked persons in the city. You can't say no to him. He's like the godfather. Nobody dares say no to him. My immediate reaction was to accept, because these days, you know, with Google, the easiest thing to do is Google a speech and you're good to go. So I said, I'm on. And then I Googled. And I came across very brilliant, what they call as MBA commencement addresses, and I got very excited. And then when you look a little more closely, and these are done by very, very distinguished people, when you look a little more closely, you find that in the US, the MBA commencement speech is referred to when you pass out. So it's commencement of a career in the corporate world and not the commencement of college. So I said, my God, now I have a problem, because all the speeches are when you're graduating and not when you are joining. And I think this is something that makes ISBR quite unique, to have something at the beginning. Because when I go back to my year 79 when I joined IMA, I don't recollect having anything like this, where somebody told us what needed to be done, or somebody gave us an inspiring speech or the like. So this is another thing I think that's quite unique about ISBR, to do an event like this. So now the question came in terms of what do I speak about? And you know, the overarching, and especially because it took me back to my own college days, the overriding sentiment was one of nostalgia. You know, the best comment I've heard about nostalgia isn't what it used to be. You know, whenever you meet elderly people, they'll say Bangalore used to be deadly, now it's not so good. You'll meet anybody that, you know, we had a culture like this, but now it's not like that. So the whole thing about nostalgia is to keep thinking that there were better days earlier and now it's terrible, which is really not the case. I remember my own, when I first came to Bangalore and took up a job, I used to run into this gentleman. The building was pretty elderly, was about 85 plus. And every time he used to catch me and say, you know, when we worked under the British, it was very different. And now it's, and I used to run for cover every time I met him. And I must be thinking, now that I'm a white-haired gentleman, others must be running from cover every time I start speaking about those were the days. But notwithstanding that, I thought I'll peg my thing on a bit of nostalgia and try to find what's the connect between the good old days and what the current is also about, to try and find that bridge between nostalgia and the current. The next thing, you know, being a management consultant, you think about how do you want to pitch your speech. Many of you would have heard about this great consulting firm, McKinsey. Yes. And there is actually, they have this thing about, they make this point on a slide. The right number of points to make, they say, is 3. They say 2 is too little, 4 is too many. Make 3 points and there's a chance that the message will go home. That's by and large the management construct of McKinsey. I've gone further. I've got some 10 big points to just quickly touch upon, because I just thought it's quite possible that different points will resonate with different people, because you know, you can say 10 is too many to anyway absorb, but it's possible that one of the points resonate, and if one point goes home, then there is change that has happened, and that can happen. So with that said, let me just go about telling you about 10 things that I thought about that I'd like to tell a batch, an MBA PGDM batch that is venturing out for the next 2 years on this journey. The first thing that strikes me when I go and think about those years and think about what it means now, what I realize is that these 2 years are the time that you strike the most deepest friendships that last you a lifetime. You know, if I look at in my own life, my wife's life, we look at our thing, there are really 3 distinct phases. There is the school and the school buddies, which is one kind of buddies which can never get replaced, because those are the guileless days. Then there are the engineering school buddies, which is the intermediate between your final destination, which you did in postgraduate. But the ones today, and also maybe it has something to do with where you work and the circle that you run into, the strongest connects. So we have a 20 saal baad group which I set up for our batch. So we have had a 20 saal, 25, 30, and now we're going to have a 35 saal baad do. And over 50% of the batch turn up for these do's. So really there are a lot of deep abiding friendships. The world is about networks. I mean, you know about LinkedIn and Facebook and what have you. So the kind of friendships that you will form here are those that will stand you in great stead. You know, Dean Manohar, before we came here, said this has about 180 students, of which I think 120 are joining today. That's what you mentioned. And that just rang a bell, because my batch in 79 was also 180 students. Then he gave another very interesting statistic, 45% girls. Wow. We had 12 girls in a batch of 180. And 11 of them married batchmates. Talk about deep friendships. The next thing really is, which I'd like to move on to, is the importance of teamwork. I know we are currently in an era where we believe that one man or one person can fix everything, but life is not so simple when you actually get down to the nitty-gritty details of work and doing work, delivering for your clients, if in case you work for someone, or even if you're an entrepreneur. Teamwork is extremely critical. In fact, I remember, you know, in our first 5 days, obviously you don't know anyone, so you meet some friends, you just connect and you start becoming a small group in your section. And so we had to have these teams that were formed with 5 people for various projects. And we were already 4 of us who had become quite pally, and we were looking for number 5. When one of our co-friends said, hey, there's this guy who's a gold medalist from IIT Delhi and he's looking for a group. I think we'll try and get him to come into our group, after which we don't have to do any work for 2 years. So that really was our strategy. So that guy did approach us and we played hard to get, saying we'll have to look into it. But we quietly let him in, and truth be told, he actually saved us over the next 2 years, because whenever there were projects, we were okay, we were academically okay, but we were not shooting to be gold medalists and silver medalists, but he was. And every time we met for team meetings, we said, hey, let's again meet tomorrow morning and continue with this. And he was getting panicky that this group was not going to see him to his gold and silver medal. And he said, no, leave it with me, I will do this work and we can review it tomorrow morning. And we said, okay, that sounds like a good idea. That said, the importance of teamwork is extremely critical when you get out of here 2 years. And over the next 2 years, you'll have chances to work in different kinds of groups and use that to develop your team skills as you work in your various projects. Very critical. The third thing, and this is really, I know my firm does a lot of work with the IT industry, and we have actually over the years spoken to at least about 50,000 people internationally who use Indian IT services. So people who, I mean, companies like Infosys and Wipro and HCL and what have you. And you know, one of the things that struck us as we kept talking to people, they said the one thing that Indians could be better at as they get into the work life is they say that we don't speak up enough. You know, we may know what needs to be said, but we don't speak up. And if there's one trait I think that we could collectively improve, maybe it has something to do with culturally, that we are respectful of elders, we don't want to actually contradict them or challenge them. Our schooling system is one that we've been rapped on our knuckles if we ever spoke up, so you thought silence was better. But the reality in the world, and some of you would decide to go on to become consultants and the like, the ability to speak up. I know there is a saying which says it's better to be silent and thought a fool than to speak up and remove all doubts. But that having been said, in the real world as you work, if you have contrarian viewpoints, etc., people will not know till you actually speak up. And that's another important trait. And whenever you get a chance, challenge. If you have a contrarian view, stand up and try to defend the contrarian view. Because often the contrarian view, while actually might be the right view, and the majority view necessarily need not be the right one. Another thing which I find, and you know, we recruit in our firm, and which again the nostalgia bit vis-a-vis the old, we find that people are fairly unidimensional that's coming out of our education system. You need to be a lot more multifaceted, multidimension, extracurricular, whatever you want to call it. But one important thing, if I have to push for, it would be read. I think the art of reading is increasingly disappearing. If there is a magazine, if you have to say finally pick up one paper, and I'm talking to management students, if there's one magazine that you need to pick up and read regularly, I would suggest The Economist. You may not agree with the views of The Economist. They have very, very strong opinionated views. But its English style is excellent for people going in for a management career. I can tell you in the early days when I used to read The Economist, I used to go to sleep by the first page or second page. It was that difficult. It was one of the best sleep-inducing magazine ever. But trust me, as you read more, in some subconscious way, the style gets into you. I mean, you could read the New York Times, there are others, but I just picked The Economist because they have various sections which goes from politics to arts and culture to business and books and what have you. But the style is excellent. And that is something that will stand you in good stead. You see, as you go out, you need to differentiate yourself. And if you have good written skills, written styles, etc., which comes from a lot of such reading, it will be a distinguishing feature as you go out into the world 2 years later. Curiosity killed the cat. But my recommendation, I run a market research firm, be seriously curious all the time. In fact, there's a book by Rashmi Bansal, which is Stay Curious, Stay Foolish, or something to that effect. Yeah, stay hungry, stay foolish, but if you dig deeper, curiosity is a theme that keeps coming through as you talk to the entrepreneurs in that particular thing. The thing about, if you're not curious, you are going to just accept whatever is told to you. You get a data point, you have to think for yourself, why is this happening? You know, life, particularly in management, is about constructing a fair amount of hypothesis and either proving it or disproving it. It doesn't have to be necessarily done statistically, as you might do in a MSM course. But intuitively, unless you have some constructs which either get fortified or get demolished, you really haven't made progress in terms of your own insight and thinking. And that will come only as to if you're curious. You hear an MH17 has gone down, you can just say, oh, it's gone down, somebody shot it. Or you can go deeper and say, hey, who could have shot it? Why would they shoot it? What happens next? That's what curiosity is about. Thinking through the next 5 things as to why this could have happened, and etc., rather than just taking at face value one data point. If there is one trait which I find that the younger generation could cultivate to a greater extent, and where I'm really nostalgic about the old days, it's about a trait that I would call attention to detail. You know, the saying normally is devil is in the details. It's not. Actually, God is in the details. That's really the original quote. Somehow, I don't know what is it about the newer generations, they feel anything that they do, they are descendants of Picasso or something. They don't need to review their work. That their first output is a perfect output. They don't need to read it again and make some corrections and tweak it. I don't know what it is about it. I've been thinking about it as to why this has happened from what we used to be about 25, 30 years earlier. And maybe technology is part of the reason why this is happening. You know, in our days when I started work, we didn't even have the PC really hadn't hit the world. There was something called an electric typewriter or something. So if a report had to be typed, you had to sit, give it to the typist and type. And if you made a mistake there, you had to put white fluid and over-type on it. And I think the white fluid showed out that you had done dreadful work in the first place. Maybe that was the reason. So we tried to make it error-free, or you had to type the whole page again. Today with technology, where there's cut and paste features and arrays, and you point out to somebody that, hey, this is wrong, no problem, I'll change it, I'll go back. Because after all, PowerPoint has the feature to just change that slide and come back. I feel that this is another distinguishing trait where you can actually differentiate yourself. A person who has attention to detail will never be without a job. People love, particularly superiors love people who get things done error-free. Trust me, if there's only one trait you want to develop attention to detail as that trait. It's my favorite trait in any subordinate that I would look for. Reading and some of the other things will come a lot later. Another thing really, and the thing about, and this was true of my time more than thing,
And especially when you're passing out of an institute like IMA, you have got a chip on your shoulder. So I know a lot of my batchmates who went out with this thing that they are God's chosen gift to solve the world's business problems. So they ended up in companies saying, give me your problems, I can solve it for you. Hello, it doesn't work like that. The thing is, you need to stoop to conquer. You have to be ready to do ordinary things till a time comes when you can do extraordinary things. You cannot say that because I'm an MBA, I am a chosen one and therefore I'm different from the pack. You become different from the pack by what you do, not necessarily by the degrees that you get. So that's really the other thing that you need to. So what you do in life is what is going to determine you in terms of, so be prepared to stoop to conquer. I remember my own, I knew Mr. Anandram and we were both at MICO ages ago. Here I came as an engineering MBA from IMA and joined MICO. And my boss was one Mr. Kellerman. We used to call him Mr. Killerman. So, and the first day he tells me that the next 6 months you will be in the R&D department doing engine testing. And I'm saying, hello, engine testing, I've done MBA, where's business problem? Give me, I can do return on investment and what have you. He said, no, you will go and do engine testing work. Because what he said is, unless you become good at the basics of what this business is about, nobody is going to respect your IRR calculation and feasibility studies and the like. Go and build credibility first. Another thing really is, and that's something for you to think 2 years from now, but it's something that you need to give some thought. I'm a great believer that more and more of us, particularly people, we are the elite. We are people who are English-speaking people, who have got access to education, have the capacity in a country which is predominantly poor. And we have a responsibility to society. Now we have two options, and both are okay options. We can go and work for someone, but we can also go and set up businesses for ourselves as entrepreneurs. And I always tell youngsters, don't rule out the entrepreneurship option. It doesn't have to be that you have to stand necessarily in queue to work for somebody, which is also fine. Both are required. But India as a society today, it can be as profitable, if not more profitable, to be an entrepreneur rather than work for someone else. There are phases. And therefore, as you go about thinking about the future, don't rule out being someone who's a job creator, who chooses to become an entrepreneur. And whatever you do as you go over the next 2 years, another useful skill is to prioritize. Management will tell you 80-20 and stuff like that, ABC analysis, but at the end of the day, it's about prioritizing. What's more important, what's less important. There are too many things to do, there will be deadlines to be met, but if you have a sense of prioritizing every time as to what is more important and address them accordingly, you will find that you are a better time manager, you're a more effective manager, and the like. Which really brings me to the last part of the point that I want to stress. Even the bio said something about, I push for the idea of individual social responsibility, ISR. Now, when you go out into the world, you would have heard, and you already might have heard of a word called CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility. The government has passed a law that 2% of all profits will have to go towards corporate social responsibility, almost like a mandate. But to my mind, the more important thing that each of us can do, I've been quite active on a whole lot of social initiatives. I call myself as a professor of lost, hopeless, difficult causes, because I work with government pro bono, and it's almost impossible at times, it looks like, to get anything done. But having said that, what I've realized, for example, Bangalore has a huge garbage problem. The garbage problem doesn't automatically happen. It's not Mandur's problem to fix. The garbage problem happens because we are irresponsible. We litter. We don't segregate our waste. That's what I mean by individual social responsibility. When you add a traffic signal, we see so many people jumping signals. These are people like us who jump signals. And that's why you have the chaos of the traffic thing at those junctions. So individual social responsibility, as you go out to become successful people, successful business people or professionals or whatever you choose to be, don't ever forget that as part of the elite we have responsibilities, and the least that all of us can do is really what I call as individual social responsibility. We can be responsible in the things that we do that impact society. I always, to close, it's quite sacrilegious to say that one wants to paraphrase Gandhiji. You know, Gandhiji made this statement, be the change you want to see. That's what he said. You know, Amartya Sen wrote a book called The Argumentative Indian. I think we are more an opinionated Indian. We have an opinion on everything, more than just being argumentative. I am very, very clear that this place would be good if only the other person behaved properly. If only the other person did not do this, I feel this place will be good. So invariably, the way most people tend to approach is, it's the other person that's the problem, it's not me. So for me, the paraphrasing would work something like this. Be the change you want others to be, and you will see a better society. Thank you so much.